Today, on this episode of The Crossover, we will be discussing life undercover, working in the CIA, with former CIA agent and Silver Star Medal recipient Bill Pineiro. Learn what becoming a CIA agent entails, the dangerous missions they encounter, and how they disguise their identity. Much more on this episode of The Crossover. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be talking with my friend Bill Pineiro today. Life in the CIA. Hey, Bill, what's going on, bud?
How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. Listen, thanks for joining us. I know you got to run in a little bit, so I'll just do a quick intro here while everyone's logging on. We have the pleasure of talking to my good friend and colleague with an incredible story. Bill joined the Marines at age 17 and was part of the 1st Division, spending time in Central America and South America since he was fluent in Spanish. He transitioned to the Intelligence Division and spent time in Granada, where he was awarded the Silver Star Medal for his bravery in saving several agents in the field of combat. He subsequently was recruited to the CIA as a special agent and was sent to Nicaragua for reconnaissance. And he's here to discuss life undercover, working in the CIA. This has always really fascinated me. So, again, Bill, thanks for joining us. Very excited to talk to you today a little bit about what that lifestyle entails.
It was interesting and it was fun, and dangerous at the same time. I basically my job was to collect information on military and political on the different countries I was in, and just pass it on to my handler. And that's most of the stuff that I did. It was really interesting because the training that I got a 9 months training in Langley, and what we did is learn how to blend in, be friendly. You start looking for jobs. I used to do construction work, and believe it or not, you'll be surprised how much information you can obtain from people that once they start trusting you.
Well, let me start by, I guess, just let's set the groundwork. What is the overall role of the CIA in this country?
Well, during what I did was basically to collect political and military information of what was going on in the country.
And how is, people want to know a lot of times, difference between FBI and CIA?
Well, CIA, they're both intelligence division, but the CIA has no law enforcement, at all. So basically, the CIA is more just intelligence.
And how did you first get interested? Was it something that you've always thought about as a kid? Was there an event in the military?
It was when I joined the intelligence division. It was really interesting, and I found it fascinating. And at one point, I was approached by them later on. One of the guys that met me felt that I would do a good job, and that's how I got involved, and basically wanted to continue serving this country.
Now, I want to hear about the training. I think the training, the background for these kind of special agencies is very unique. Tell us the training that you went through. You kind of mentioned it earlier. They teach you how to blend in, how to become friends with local people, how to extract information. Tell us a little bit about that.
No, basically that's it. It's you become very friendly. For you to obtain intelligence, you have to get the trust of the people. And at the beginning, my role was, I was a deserter from Cuba, and people, well, this guy, he's running away from something, and you kind of like blend into it, and you give your story, and you open up to them that basically it's not true what you're saying, but they feel that you're, hey, look, this guy we can trust, he's opening up to us, and that's what my role was. And that's how it was. It was a lot of acting,
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
Can you give us just an example, or even make up something if you can't say it, but the type of information that you would try to extract from these people?
Well, depend on what country you were in. Okay, there was in Panama, a lot of it was about the government dealing drugs, that they were saying they weren't doing it, and so you kind of like work your way to a certain area of the political aspect, and you befriend somebody, and and it goes from there on. You know, every role is different. Every role where you're at, it all depends where you're at.
Is there any formal education that's needed, or is it just a short, brief course?
When I was drafted, we'll say, I only had a high school education, but back then they were sort of desperate for Spanish-speaking agents, and I fit it right in. I had my military background, but nowadays it's I mean, you have lawyers and IT experts. I mean, the agency has grown so much. It's that now it's just investigating intelligence and the internet and everything. Now it's just humongous, you know.
How do they prevent moles? Meaning, like, what kind of background checks do they have when someone's like, hey, I want to be a CIA agent? How do you know that person is not a mole for another country?
You go through a lot of investigation, background investigation, lie detectors. I mean, these polygraphs. I must have taken like 6 polygraphs, and the background is intense. But it's funny because the background that they do to the people that you know, they don't say they're the CIA. They would say, "Oh, he's applying for this position in the government, or this position in as a fireman," or like they approached some of my old friends and they said that I was applying for a police department. You know, so they do a very intense background.
What would you say is the number one most important characteristic of a successful CIA agent?
Number one, to blend in the situation you're in and convince people that they can trust you, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a skill set that I think people are just either have it or they don't. So it's
and I'm always been like a very friendly guy. I talk to everyone, and I think that kind of like helped out too, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If you're very a person that you're very introverted and you don't get along with people, you're in the wrong field.
Yeah, it sounds like personality is probably the number one characteristic that they look for when they're deciding who's going to be an agent. What would you say is the biggest challenge you faced when you were transitioning to become a CIA agent?
The biggest challenge was when you go into another country was to not, I mean, be confident and not be nervous about what you were doing. Don't second guess yourself. I think if you second guess yourself, you're going to get in trouble.
What would you say is like the most dangerous situation? Again, if you can't talk about it, you can't talk about it. But
I'll tell you one, and it was in Colombia. In Colombia, I was actually we were eating in a restaurant, and I always spoke Spanish, but for some reason I said something in English, and there was a guy with me, and he goes, "Oh, you speak English?" And I said, "Yeah, you know." So I had to like make up a story, and then later on, they actually took me somewhere to interrogate me and at gunpoint. So that was like the most dangerous part, and that's about it. That's as much as I can tell right there.
Wow, that sounds scary. for sure. Yeah, I mean, you got to definitely think on your feet. Like one little slip like that, and that they basically opened up, and they suspected that you were someone who you weren't.
Exactly, and thank God, if you get nervous while you're doing this and you're being interviewed by them, and you start second guessing, it's like, okay, that's it. You have to be confident. Hey, listen, you know, I spoke English. Remember, I came from Cuba, but in Cuba they teach English. You know, so that was about it. You know, but it from there on, actually, within 2 weeks, I was pulled out of the assignment when I told my handler.
Yeah. Now, what about training for that? Do they train you to deal with interrogation, torture?
That I can't talk about. I can't talk about that part.
Reasonable. So what are the 4 major divisions of the CIA, and how are they different from one another?
Well, you have intelligence. Now you have the internet also. You have, what would it say? It has different branches. I know it's intelligence and politics, and now the internet. I mean, From what, remember, when I was in back in the early 80s to now, it's a different story.
Yeah. Were
I
there any
still have,
divisions? Were there any
I'm sorry?
divisions back when? Were there any divisions back when you did it, or was it just one
It
agency?
was just one. Back then, it was just one, you know, and it was all basically, a lot of it was political and military, most of it, you know. I
Hmm.
mean, we didn't have to worry about cyber attacks and any of that stuff, you know.
Yeah, definitely a new world.
Yeah.
One of the things that really fascinates people is how you guys protect your identity, just like you were talking about. Are you able to talk about the training that went into identity protection, the mechanisms that are used to protect CIA agent identities?
I can't talk about it because there's still some of those things are still in effect.
Are still in effect, and the training that goes into that must be extreme, I'm
It is
assuming.
a very extreme, you know, 15 hours a day training for 9 months. You know, I did it myself was for 9 months. There's people that spend a year. You know.
Yeah. And so do most CIA agents have to live double lives?
You know what? In my case, I you could say yes. I could say yes. It's more of a double life because when you are done with your, let's say I'm done with my mission that I was doing, and I come back to the state, I was a different person. So
Can
yeah,
your
I would say yes. Yeah.
can your family and friends know what you do?
The only one that knew was my dad.
Wow. Okay. So, but is that uniform? Like if someone joins the CIA and they're doing intelligence missions, are you able to tell,
No,
wow,
no,
not even your family?
no, not even your family. I mean, I had times that were I was in different countries that I couldn't even talk to my family for a long
Yeah.
time.
So what do you tell your family that you do? Or what do most
They didn't know.
agents?
They thought I was still in the Marines. You know, I was deployed somewhere or stuff like that, but they still thought I was in the Marines.
Wow. Super interesting how that works. I mean, you have people who know everything about you, like your spouse and your kids, and you can't tell them what you do. But
Yeah. No,
uh,
let me tell you, it's a tough life. It really is. And I mean, I did it for a while until I started getting a family and it was getting too dangerous, and that's when I basically called it quits.
what was the biggest point of satisfaction for you? Like, what is the draw to being a CIA agent for you and for anyone who joins it?
For me, was I felt like I was so as you know, I'm Cuban descendant, and my dad always taught me to be very grateful for this country for opening the doors for us. So for me, it was an honor to serve this country and help in everything I could.
It's a good motive to do it, and
Yeah.
obviously we can't do it without people like yourself who sacrifice, potentially their lives and everything else you were talking about. If you could do it over again, if you could do all your career over again, including CIA, what would you do differently, if anything?
I would have gone to college before joining the Marines.
And what would that have done for you? Just have a better
You would
background?
have I think you would have you do have more opportunities as a college graduate.
Okay.
And I tell kids nowadays that they want to join the Marines. Sometimes they come to my house, and I have an area where I have a lot of Marine stuff and my old medals and stuff. And I tell everybody, hey, go to college first. Don't go in as a grunt. Go to college.
Yeah.
But
And
college is not for everyone. It wasn't for me back then. I
of
went to
course.
college after I came back.
Yeah. I, it- how big is the CIA? Just so people have an idea. Roughly, how many special agents are there? Can you give us a
Oh,
rough number?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that the CIA is all over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah.
And just to like debunk myths, would you say being a CIA special agent is more like Jason Bourne or James Bond?
None of the above.
None of the above. None of the above.
None of the above. Somebody asked me one time, he goes, "What kind of gadgets do you use?" I said, "No, no,
So
none."
there's no watches that kind of explode and
I'm pretty sure there is, but none were introduced to me. But I'm pretty sure there is. I mean,
that's
I
great.
heard stories. I heard a lot of stories of a lot of gadgets, but I never got to see them.
It's very, very cool. Listen, last question, because I know you got to run. What is your message to anyone listening, potentially who wants to pursue a career in the CIA?
my message is make sure this is what you want, because it's a lot of sacrifice. You know, if you're not willing to sacrifice, don't even bother. Seriously.
That's a
Yeah.
great way to put it. I think I love this interview, not only because it was short and sweet, but you gave us a great background into something that no one really knows about. We've seen movies, like I said, Jason Bourne, James Bond, obviously not accurate. And there's a lot of myths behind it, and I'm glad that you kind of debunked a lot of those myths. Thanks for everything you've done, Bill. Your background is amazing. Your work in the Marines, the CIA, intelligence agency, all of that. Really
And the
appreciate
University
it.
of Miami.
Exactly, but we want to talk about the military stuff. But again, you know, your background, everything that you did after your work at the CIA, really appreciate it, man. And this country does as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, buddy. Thank you. I appreciate it. Good times.
All right, man. I'll see
All
you
right.
soon.
Take care. All right.
Take care, man.